All right, can you all hear me? Can you all hear me? We back. I think we back. We had some technical difficulties. It's frankly just really just it's a problem. The internet situation. My yeah. All right. Um, fuck. Are we online? Can you all hear me? I think we'll continue, but it's incredibly annoying that happened. I don't even know how long we were offline, but all right, we're just going to pretend that nothing happened. All right, hopefully YouTube will stitch these two parts back together as one. Anyway, all right, so I don't know what you all missed, but Jon Snow has just learned an excellent lesson in humility from Tyrion the dwarf, and then we have a scene with Jaime and Cersei. Well, it doesn't really tell us much. We really just know that their relationship is a bit weird and fucked up. They're slapping each other and grabbing each other, and it's just sort of oozing non-consensual shenanigans. But Jaime basically says that, man, don't worry about the politics. Don't be paranoid about all of this. I'll just kill anyone who gets in our way. Tyrion has a line in the books about how Jaime will never untie a knot that he can just slash with his sword. So Jaime wants to solve everything by violence, which is of course in stark contrast with what he does later in the show when he tries to secure Myrcella from Dorne, and he makes a deal with Doran, and with season 6 when he ends the siege of Riverrun peacefully. So Jaime certainly develops and changes a lot later in the series. So yeah, what's the stream quality like for you guys? Is this working? Because we're on a lower thing now. Let me know what the stream quality is like. And then we have a conversation with Barristan Selmy and Robert Baratheon and Jaime Lannister. So Robert is reminiscing about old wartime stuff, talking about their first kills. And Jaime talks about killing Aerys and how Aerys just repeated, burn them all. Right up until Jaime killed him. And so this shot in particular really shows us the trauma that Jaime has experienced, and again makes him a lot more sympathetic than he is this early in the books. And we've got Daenerys in the Dothraki Sea, which looks completely different in every season that it appears in, but I guess they're in different parts of the sea. And they're marching along in this big Khalasar, and Daenerys decides that I'm just going to stop the entire train of Dothraki because I want to go and have a little chill in the bushes. So Daenerys is becoming a lot more confident in her role as a Khaleesi. She's confident enough to stop the whole thing and go off on her own. So she's hanging out, but then Viserys charges in and grabs Daenerys by the throat and is aggressive and awful to her because he takes it as some kind of personal slight that she made a command without running it by him. But then the Dothraki come in and help Daenerys, and so it shows how Daenerys can use the Dothraki as a kind of force, as a way to defend herself, and it's a way to stand up against her legitimately insane brother. Her brother has always treated her terribly and violently, and now for the first time in her life, Daenerys is able to stand up against him, and the way she's able to stand up against him is as a political leader of the Dothraki. So Daenerys is rapidly becoming more confident and powerful, and Jorah is getting rapidly more impressed. We know that at this point Jorah is actually spying on Daenerys and reporting on her to Varys, but Jorah is starting to become more and more impressed by Daenerys and eventually becomes truly loyal. So meanwhile, at Castle Black, Jon Snow is hanging out on top of the wall. It's pretty frosty. He goes and talks to his boy Benjen, Uncle Benjen. And Benjen says that, hey, I'm going beyond the wall for a ranging. I'm going to have adventure. It's going to be great. And Jon's like, can I come? Where's my invite? And Benjen says, nope, you don't get to come. You don't get to be a ranger until you've earned it. So again, Jon's learning to be more humble. Similar to Sansa. We want to lower the chat. We can lower the chat a little bit. Similar to Sansa, Jon has this idea of all the wonderful, exciting things that he wants to do. Jon at the Wall compared to Sansa at King's Landing, and Jon is realizing that his assumptions about what the Night's Watch would be are wrong, and he really needs to prove himself the hard way. That's what Jon's learning. And so Jon stands alone on the wall. And then we have a conversation with Benjen and Yoren and Tyrion. And Benjen does not get along with Tyrion because Benjen is very serious and stoic and very stark about the whole role of the Night's Watch and the importance of the Night's Watch. Whereas Tyrion's just like, yeah, but you don't really do anything, do you? Apart from like keep off some, wildlings who, don't have any training or weapons. And Benjen just keeps going, nah, man, we're really important. Don't diss my club. And Tyrion just sort of is really light about it and makes jokes with Yoren. And Tyrion proposes that Yoren come south with him as a traveling companion. And then Daenerys is having her hair done by the handmaiden Eerie, and Daenerys learns that she's pregnant. So her relationship with the Dothraki is deepening, and then Jorah finds out that Daenerys is pregnant. And then he makes this comment about, oh, I need to go and ride somewhere else. I need to go and check the post box, which is the moment, presumably, where Jorah is going and sending a message to Varys saying that Daenerys is pregnant. And it's that information that leads to the wine cellar attempting to poison Daenerys later on. So Jorah is more interested in at this point in returning home to Westeros. He's hoping to get a royal pardon from Varys and the Small Council, and so he informs on Daenerys to achieve that. And then we got Jon training his fellow Night's Watchmen, and he's actually trying to help them as opposed to just beating them up. And so Tyrion looks on proudly that Jon has listened to his lesson. Yes, indeed, Danny Buck. Moon meteors. So then Aemon talks to Tyrion and he's like, we're not joking about these White Walkers, mate. Like, they're real, they're frosty, they'll stick you with the pointy end. You need to be worried about White Walkers. And Tyrion's like, I just don't believe in magic. I don't believe in that kind of skullduggery. So, nah, mate. And if only Tyrion did believe. I mean, imagine if Tyrion, because like Jor and Maester Aemon are trying, like they realize that Tyrion is the brother of the Queen, and they're hoping that if they can convince Tyrion to like dedicate some resources to the Night's Watch, then maybe they'd have a decent chance of actually ending the Long Night. But Tyrion is skeptical, and I'm sure Tyrion will regret his skepticism in Season 8 when the White Walkers come in force. And then we have a shot that I don't think I can show with Drogo and Daenerys, who are now well and truly in love, and they've got these dragon eggs by their side. And then Tyrion pisses off the edge of the world, because why wouldn't you? I mean, if you were a rich dwarf with not a lot of responsibility, surely you would just travel to all the coolest places in the world. So they do, and Jon and Tyrion part on good terms. They're pretty friendly, and Tyrion leaves to the south, leaving Jon alone on the wall with his duty. And Tyrion, of course, the relationship between Jon and Tyrion, this friendship becomes important in Season 7 when they meet again and help secure the alliance between Jon and Daenerys. And Arya meets Syrio Forel, who is bald in the books. But I like his hair in the show. And he's like, yep, we're going to do you some learning. We're going to teach you how to stick them with the pointy end. They learn to fight, and it's great. But there's also like this specter of death that comes in. Because what Syrio says as they're fighting, like Syrio keeps like, poking Arya with the sword and demonstrating that, hey, you'd be dead if this was real fighting. He keeps saying, dead, you're dead. And that specter and that threat of death looms over Arya. She, of course, ends up joining a death cult in Braavos, where Syrio is from. Oh, isn't that a coincidence? And so, yeah, killing and death become soaked into Arya's story. And then Ned Stark looks on, and at first he's kind of like proud to see his little girl like becoming more powerful and independent, but then he starts to be disturbed, and these like clanging war sounds start playing in the show, which is a flashback to like Ned's own experiences of war. Because as cute as it is to see your kid waving a sword around, swords kill people, and warriors die, and so Ned is concerned for the safety of his child. And then we get Bran in a dream, standing and using archery, and then the three-eyed crow, this like literally three-eyed crow, leads Bran in the dream down to the Winterfell crypts, and then the dream ends. And this dream repeats a few times, and it is an invitation for Bran to like enter the whole magical realm of Weirwood stuff, which he's starting to get into. But it's also specifically foreshadowing the death of Ned, because the crypts are where the dead Starks are kept, and later on, Bran finds out about the crypt, but finds out about Ned's death and goes to the crypts, and that's sort of the first hint that this raven power can see into the future, and the magic is real. It's not just a dream. So then we have old Nan with Bran, and Bran's being despondent, and Theon says, hey, we've got to go and put on your lord pants because we've got visitors, and Hodor comes in and carries Bran out to meet with Yoren, who has come to the Winterfell along with Tyrion Lannister. And Robb Stark at first is aggressive towards Tyrion. He doesn't welcome Tyrion because he's heard about this whole, Lannisters being out after the Starks thing. And in the books, Robb has a sword laid across his lap, bare steel, which is like a specific gesture which indicates that a guest is unwelcome in your house. So Robb's just trying to be strong, like in this case it's unnecessary, but Robb is this kid who's been left in charge of this giant castle and to rule this realm. So he's trying to be tough, and in this case he sort of miscalculates. But Tyrion does a kind thing for Bran because he gives him this special saddle design, which is designed so that a cripple like Bran is able to ride a horse properly, because Tyrion needs something similar because he's a dwarf. So this sort of helps to get Bran out of his depression, because Bran realizes that, hey, I'm not trapped to never, I might never walk again, but at least I can ride. So this represents freedom and hope to Bran. And to Tyrion specifically, this is an indication that he's a man with compassion. Tyrion has a soft spot for cripples, bastards, and broken things. And so that compassion is an important part of Tyrion's character, something that his sister Cersei lacks. And it's also very interesting that Tyrion knows how to make custom saddles for special custom situations, because wouldn't it be helpful if Tyrion was able to perhaps make a dragon saddle to make it easier to ride dragons? That might be handy if Tyrion was ever to ride a dragon. There have been times when Game of Thrones author George Martin has hinted at the possibility of Tyrion riding a dragon, so maybe that will happen. Maybe in the books, at least. I mean, since there are only 2 dragons alive in the show, you've got Daenerys riding Drogon, and you've got Jon riding Rhaegal, presumably. Maybe there isn't a dragon for Tyrion to ride in the show. And then we get sort of a frankly weird scene where Tyrion is really rude to Theon. Like, Tyrion just sort of makes fun of Theon for being like a glorified prisoner, and says that his family is stupid for rebelling against the Starks. And he says, haha, I had sex with the prostitute that you like to have sex with. Tyrion's sort of uncharacteristically mean, but I think the point of this scene is just to show how Tyrion feels, to show how Theon feels mistreated. Theon feels like he's not in the right place, and that no one appreciates him, and it's those feelings which lead Theon to eventually betray the Starks. And so then back at Castle Black, we have a new arrival to the Night's Watch. It is Sam Tarly, who is singularly ill-equipped to be a Night's Watchman, because he's so fat and cowardly and has no skill with a sword, so he just gets beaten down immediately, and Alliser Thorne takes great pleasure in beating Sam down, because Alliser Thorne is just awful, and Rast enjoys doing it as well. But it quickly becomes apparent that Sam is just not going to have a good time here, and Jon defends him and sort of befriends Sam, but like the problem remains of like, what are we going to do with this gentleman in a place that he's just not ready for. And it also establishes Jon as a protector of the weak. Similar to that scene that just happened with Tyrion, Jon also has sympathy. I mean, I think for Jon it comes in a different way. Like Jon doesn't so much identify with Sam, but I think Jon has like this like masculine code of honor that says that you shouldn't beat up the weak. He's got that sort of heroic, chivalrous notion that perhaps came from Ned, where he believes that you got to stand up for the innocent and the weak. And then Daenerys, meanwhile, goes to Vase Dothrak, which is the sacred city of the Dothraki, where the Dosh Khaleen reside. And Jorah and Viserys is with her. Viserys is considerably upset since the sort of power balance has changed between him and Daenerys. And then we have a bath scene with is that okay? Yeah, we can get away with that. Between Viserys and Doria, and Viserys talks about what dragons mean to him, and Doria says how dragons are amazing because they represent freedom. You can fly anywhere, and they represent power, and you can kill people. So aren't dragons cool? And Viserys is much in agreement. And Viserys talks about his family, the Targaryens. Like, this is basically some sexposition, is what this is. It's just talking about the background of the Targaryen family, and Viserys lists a bunch of dragon names, and there are some really silly ones which like aren't in the books. I don't remember what they are, but Viserys lists some names that are like references to various things, and like they're not canonical to the books, which is funny because like the books have like literally dozens of like canonical dragon names, but I guess in season 1 they don't worry about such things. And then we have this shot of Septa Mordane and Sansa looking upon the Iron Throne, and they're talking about Sansa's hopes of becoming the queen, and like Sansa's worrying about like, oh, what if I only have daughters and not sons, and like she's just being anxious about her relationship with Joffrey. And it also of course raises the question of what kind of political heights might Sansa reach. Will Sansa ever become queen like she hoped? My suspicion is that she'll become Queen of the North, but not Queen of Westeros on the Iron Throne. But, this shot of Sansa looking at the throne is certainly suggestive. Then we have this small council meeting, and what are they arguing about in this one? I don't remember what they're arguing about in this scene. It looks like it's a short one. Pycelle is looking a bit sweaty and beardy. And then Ned goes to Pycelle's lab, and he's questioning him about the death of Jon Arryn, I believe, and they mention this book, I think, which is the lineages of the Seven Kingdoms, and it's about the seed being strong and so on. I don't know, we'll get to that. But Arya is standing on one toe, and she's learning balance, and she's taking all the lessons that Syrio Forel has. Oh yeah, no, that's right, Fresh Regi in the chat. Yeah, I think it is when they learn about the tourney of the Hand of the King that they're talking about here, where they're going to spend a whole lot of money celebrating Ned's arrival as Hand, even though Ned doesn't want to spend money because the throne is in a huge amount of debt. So Ned is just in this just increasingly uncomfortable situation. And Ned tries to comfort Arya and talk to Arya, and they talk about how Bran is not going to get to be a knight like he always dreamed of. And Ned says that, well, maybe Bran can still be a lord, or he can be a maester, or he can be a builder, which is an interesting thing to say, Bran being a builder, seeing as the wall was supposedly built by someone called Brandon the Builder. There are some wacky tinfoil theories that maybe Bran is actually all of the historical Brandons all at once, which would be pretty wacky. And then we're back at the wall. Oh yeah, but the important bit is that Sansa says, well, no, that's not me. Like, Ned says that, well, your role as a young lady is to be the wife of a lord and to bear children and to run a castle in the feminine restricted role that you're meant to have. And Arya says that's not me. So Arya is railing against the gender norms that she's expected to conform to, and dramatically continues to do so later in the series. And then we got Jon up at the wall. There are so many shots of Jon just sort of mournfully, dutifully looking out at the cold. He's got a lot of practice at doing that. And then we have this scene where Sam talks about his backstory and about how his father threatened to kill him and was just generally awful. And Jon Snow talks about his feelings, and it's this lovely bro bonding moment. And they sort of cement their friendship. And then Littlefinger takes Ned out on a stroll through the gardens, and Littlefinger points out that there are these spies in the garden. Like, even these children are spies for Varys. In the books, these are called little birds, and they have their tongues removed. Tyler in the chat, we are up to episode 4. We're like halfway through episode 4, so we're going much faster We're going much faster than before. And yeah, Fresh Regi in the chat says that, yeah, this scene with Ned and Arya, that is called back to in season 7 when Arya reunites with her direwolf Nymeria. And Arya comes up to Nymeria and it's like, great, are you going to be my pet again? I'm going to ruffle your feathers. We're going to be mates again. But Arya says, no, that's not you. That's what Arya says to Nymeria in season 7. And it refers to that idea that, well, no, Nymeria has changed and Nymeria doesn't fit into that role of being like a little domesticated doggo. Nymeria has grown beyond that. She's now a wild wolf who leads a pack. She's dangerous, she's big, she's wild, she's fierce. And so she can no longer have that same connection to Arya. So that's why she says that that's not you. That's not the role that you're meant to play. And that also has implications for Arya. Like, is Arya able to fill a more domestic, natural, like human social role when she's now this wild, independent, fierce killer? But that's not a tangent. That doesn't count. Don't worry. So then Ned is with Littlefinger, and yeah, Ned is just increasingly realizing that he is just not safe. And then they go out to meet Gendry at the forge of Tobo Mott. And Jory is taking point, and so we meet Gendry, and Gendry talks about how Jon Arryn, the previous Hand of the King, visited him and asked about his mother, and what we realize is that this kid Gendry is the bastard son of Robert Baratheon, the last of his line by the late seasons, and so Ned realizes that, oh, hang on a tick. This must be important for the reason why Jon Arryn died, and this leads him to the realization that Baratheon children are black of hair, while Lannisters are very, very blonde, and Joffrey and Myrcella and Tommen are actually Cersei and Jaime's incest spawn. That's what Ned starts to realize. Except Jaime is increasingly not blonde. He's sort of, well, there's bad lighting, but he's sort of blonde early on, but by like season 6 or 7, he's just like brown haired, which I suppose symbolizes his, decreasing Lannister loyalty. But anyway, so Jaime stands guard while the king frolics with prostitutes behind closed doors, and Jaime resents this. We get more sympathetic scenes for Jaime. Season 1 tries really hard to make us not think that Jaime is too much of a bad guy, which is a shame, because the great thing about Jaime's arc is how he changes from a bad guy to a better guy. And Jaime is really mean and rude to Jory. Well, I mean, the scene's good in that it sort of shows us how, like, it's because of Jaime's pain and frustration and trauma. Like, that's the reason why he's kind of mean to people. Like sort of like a repeated, like, archetype that happens over and over in Game of Thrones is, like, people using aggression to hide their insecurities and their fears and their hurts. Like, that's what the Hound does. That's sort of what Arya does. Even, like, Tyrion uses, like, sarcasm and stuff to sort of, like, defend his insecurities. That's repeated with lots of the characters in this show. And then Jon is talking with Rast, and Jon is like, hey, like, you really shouldn't, like, be so terrible to Sam, or he's gonna fucking die if we keep stabbing him with these tourney swords. Rast refuses, so Jon and the boys get their favorite doggo, Ghost, and they intimidate Rast in the night to force him to agree to not beat up Sam. Thank you, Alex Ishon, for the super chat. He says he appreciates this podcast. Cheers. Well, I don't think we'll actually put this in the podcast feed because it has like this visual element to it. But yeah, we normally do the other audio shows on the podcast feed. And yeah, subscribe to that if you want the Schwifty stuff. So then we got this training session in which Jon has successfully convinced his fellow brothers not to beat up Sam. So this is where we start to realize that Jon is a leader of men. Jon has successfully like banded a group together and made peace and managed to prevent violence, which is kind of what Jon does over and over. Like, Jon eventually makes peace between the Wildlings and the Night's Watch, and he manages to secure a block of people who work together to resolve a conflict. Jon is a great leader of men, and he's able to bring people together, and that skill is going to be very important in season 8 when he's trying to bring together all these different people from all these different houses with all these different conflicts and grudges between them, and to put them into a united front against the White Walkers. Or maybe he'll make peace with the White Walkers as well. Alright, so Jon's doing some stuff, and then we have a scene where Daenerys stands up to Viserys again. If I'm not mistaken, this is the scene where Daenerys gives Viserys a gift of all these like nice clothes and things, and then Viserys reacts with anger and violence because he's such a cunt. And Daenerys hits Viserys for like the first time ever. Daenerys uses physical force against Viserys, and he's shocked. So again, this is Daenerys rebelling against this abusive relationship. Hairless Oyster in the chat points out the irony that Jon manages to prevent violence by threatening violence against Rast. And yeah, that's one of the sort of ironies that I think Game of Thrones is often about. It's about the terrible calculus of force, and it's about how you need to, like Ned Stark, he keeps the peace by executing will at the start of the show, like it's all about how good guys have to kill in order to prevent good guys being killed. And it talks about the cost and the conflict in that. I think that's sort of one of the main things that Game of Thrones is about. Okay, so Jon is looking concerned because Alyssa Thorne comes and riles Jon up and is just aggressive, and Jon has to deal with that. And then we've got Daenerys talking with Jorah, and I think there's the scene where Jorah says that what I dream for is home. So we learn that Jorah, we don't know it yet, but Jorah is spying and working against Daenerys, but he's doing it for a very understandable reason. Like, Jorah was exiled from his home because he sold slaves, and he did that for a sympathetic reason as well. Like, he did it because he was trying to please his wife, who wanted money for her luxuries, and he didn't have that money, so, like, he was just trying to please his wife, and now he's just trying to get home. He's just trying to get a pardon to return to Westeros. And Daenerys wants home as well. She wants to return to Westeros, even though she's never seen Westeros as an adult. But they both sort of want the same thing, even though they hurt each other in the attempt to achieve it, if that makes sense. All right, and then we have this wonderful scene with Robert. Start the damn tourney before I piss myself, he says. And we have this wonderful portrait. I love this shot of the royal family. Or, well, some of it, at least. Like, this is the marriage that's holding Westeros together. This is King Robert and Queen Cersei, the most beautiful woman in the world and the great warrior who defeated the Mad King, the great hero. This is their depressed, sad, alienated family. They're all looking in different directions. They all look bored and sort of bummed out. Like, this is a family portrait of just a real just broken, sad family. And of course Robert doesn't know that his 3 children here are actually not his children. And the Hound here is not a knight, and he's a burned, angry pork chop of a man. And Barristan Selmy is this great warrior who's now serving this drunk king. And Barristan served the Mad King before him, and he feels uncomfortable about this whole... Everyone's just uncomfortable about this whole situation. Cersei hates her husband, who's like this physically abusive, unpleasant man, and she actually loves her brother. There's just so much resentment and drama and just bad feeling in this shot, and it's great. So the tourney, this is the tourney of the hand that Ned doesn't want in his honor. Got some lovely heraldry here. Apparently only the great houses are represented on these banners, but whatever. And Sansa looks over at Joffrey, and she's trying to be sort of smiley, and she's trying to say, I forgive you for getting my sister's friend killed. But Joffrey looks away, so Joffrey is not being nice. Joffrey vacillates, like in the first season, between being like falsely nice to Sansa and being just sort of stroppy. And then Littlefinger comes along and says, hey, he just sort of slides into Sansa's DMs, and he's like, hey, did you know that I found your mother really hot? Did you know you look a bit like a younger version of your mother? Like, he's just really creepy and awful around it. And he also tells the story to Sansa of Sandor Clegane and the way Sandor was burned by Gregor, which is, of course, foundational character motivation for the both of them. And, it also is important for Sansa in that it, like, is further undercutting her whole false notion of what knighthood is like in the real world. So then Robert is just this drunkard who's embarrassing Cersei and saying, start the damn tourney. So then Gregor Clegane, the Mountain, comes out. And this is one of his early actors. He gets recast like 15 times throughout the series. But he's wearing a helmet this time, so it doesn't really matter so much. And then Sir Hugh of the Vale. the great renowned warrior Sir Hugh of the Vale comes up against the Mountain, and it is not a fair fight. And Sir Hugh gets he dies. He gets a lance through the throat, and it never really resolves why this happened. Whether this is a deliberate killing or whether whether it was to cover up whatever Hugh knew about John Aaron's investigations, or whether Gregor Clegane just decided to kill someone, or whether it was genuinely like an accident. This death is one of the less explained ones in the series. But this death is very concerning to Sansa. She's realizing that, like tourneys and stuff, they're not just fun and games and pretty people. It's actually like people die. Like, this is serious shit. So that starts to change Sansa's perspective. And the Mountain is and Littlefinger keeps sort of whispering in Sansa's ear, saying, "Hey, these songs are not true to life." And Sandor knows that better than anyone. Sandor knows the Mountain's violence, and Sandor knows the lie of chivalry and the lie of knighthood. He knows that people are really brutal in the real world. That's what Sandor believes. So Ned continues his investigation of the whole incest situation. He's starting to realize that indeed the king's kids are not his, and Cersei comes and threatens Ned. Ned says that, I'm just a soldier. I'm trained to kill my enemies. And Cersei says, I'm also trained to kill my enemies. So we're just setting up the antagonism there. And then we go to the inn at the crossroads, where just every significant event happens in that region. And basically what happens is that Catelyn Stark accuses Tyrion Lannister of trying to kill Bran, which he did not do, but Catelyn thinks so because of Lysa's letter and because of Littlefinger's lie about the Valyrian sealed dagger. And we also have this first shot of Bronn. I believe what happens here is that Tyrion comes into the inn and he's like, I want a room, and the innkeeper's like, we don't have a spare room. And then Bronn is like, actually, you can have my room. You just chuck me some coinage and I'll give it to you. So Bronn is an opportunist who sees the opportunity to make some money, so he does, and he begins to make an ally of Tyrion. All right, so then episode 5, season 1. We are just blazing through this. Season 1, episode 5, at King's Landing, we got Barristan and Ned standing over the body of Sir Hugh and talking about, like, Sir Hugh was close to John Arryn, and John Arryn was investigating the whole incest situation. What did John Arryn know? We've also got the Silent Sisters here, who were like the nuns who look after dead bodies. That's their role. And Barristan and Selmy is good friends with Ned Stark. They respect each other. One of Ned's sort of few allies is Barristan, except Barristan is not a political player. Barristan, you can really criticize Barristan because, like, for all of his, like, nobility and chivalry, he doesn't do anything helpful in the first season. And that's sort of what Barristan is trying to atone for in the later seasons. Barristan stood by and did nothing while the Mad King did all these horrible things, and Barristan stood by and did nothing while Ned Stark was, wrongfully deposed and such. So Barristan's trying to atone for that later. And then we get Lancel Lannister in his wonderful hat. I think this might be the best hat in Game of Thrones. Lancel Lannister is just picked upon by Robert, who does the classic, go get me some striped paint and a breastplate stretcher. He's having a grand old time, is Bobby B. And look at that mighty gut. That is the gut of a man who knows how to enjoy a boar in more ways than one, but not in too many ways. Okay, so then we got the tourney again, and we've got this significant look between Renly and Loras, just to make it super clear to the viewer that these guys are boning. And then we have the joust between the Mountain and Loras, whose armor looks very pretty in contrast to the Mountain's Stalinist, brutalist influenced armor. And Renly's like, yeah, it's gonna be great. And then Littlefinger has this charming smile while they make a bet. And Loras cheats. Loras beats the Mountain in the joust by using a horse that's in heat that will distract Gregor's horse. So Lancel wins the joust, and the Mountain is not happy about that. He picks up a sword and he beheads Loras's horse, which is incredibly difficult for a man who isn't 19 feet tall like the Mountain. And so they have a fight, and then the Hound comes up to defend Loras. So the wonderful irony of this is that, like, this tourney is full of these knights who are these bold, great, chivalrous warriors who are sworn to protect the innocent, and yet in that entire place, the only person who stands up to defend Loras against the Mountain is the Hound, the guy who isn't a knight, the guy who doesn't believe in chivalry, the guy who believes that everything's bullshit. So, like, Sandor is, like, standing up, and he's sort of the most noble person in the room, ironically. Although, of course, Sandor has skin in the game. Literally, because Sandor resents his brother for having burned his face, and there's this deep, deep, deep grudge, and this is basically a preview for Clegane Bowl, which surely has got to happen in Season 8, when finally the Mountain and the Hound will put their grudge to rest with violence, the old-fashioned way. But then Robert says, "Stop in the name of your king," and then Sandor has this gorgeous moment where he has his hand raised up by Loras, and the Hound is treated as a hero. He's celebrated by the crowd for having helped Loras and being the honorary champion of the tourney, which is a very rare moment of public adulation for a dog like Sandor. And Sansa is, of course, enamored with this whole wonderful story-like romantic thing that's happened. So Sansa, for now, is still believing in the dream, but it's Sandor. It's Sandor who represents that dream, which is interesting. Yeah, and that's true, Ralph, in the chat. Yeah, the Mountain beheads his own horse, not Loras's. Yeah, that's right. Which I imagine would be an issue for the Mountain, because you'd have to, like, specially find a horse that's capable of carrying a man who is that big and heavy. Like, you'd really need a spine of steel in order to carry the Mountain that rides. So I imagine the Mountain's going to have a hard time replacing that particular horsey. Okay, so then we've got Tyrion and Catelyn traveling to the Eyrie. Tyrion thought they were traveling north to Winterfell, but Catelyn deliberately misdirected everyone around her by saying they were going to Winterfell while they were actually going to the Eyrie. So that was a smart misdirection by Catelyn, although, of course, taking Tyrion was a mistake because he's actually innocent, and this furthers a war that didn't have to happen. Capo in the chat says that the Mountain should ride a rhino. That would be appropriate. Okay, so then these fellas get attacked by mountain clansmen, and Tyrion kills a man for the first time in his life. He beats him to death with a shield, a House Bracken shield, as it happens. And Bronn and Tyrion make friends over a joke at Catelyn's expense, where Tyrion reveals that was his first kill, and Bronn says, well, after you kill someone for the first time, you should have sex with a woman, and Tyrion says, well, I'm willing if Catelyn is. So this is a bonding moment, but it's also strategic. Tyrion is making an ally of Bronn, because Tyrion is a captive here, but, he's now got his hands unchained because he was fighting, and so, like, Tyrion is cleverly maneuvering himself out of the bad situation he's in. He's making allies, he's changing his situation. And then Luwin gives us a geography lesson. There's lots of sort of hidden exposition in this first season, trying to tell the viewers all the information they need to know about where the houses are and stuff like that. And we're reminded that Theon is a Greyjoy. The Greyjoys are famed for their ship thinging and their archery and their lovemaking, Theon claims. And then Luwin responds with a sick burn by saying that, oh, well, the Ironborn are also renowned for losing rebellions, like your father's failed rebellion. So there's always a burn to be had when Theon's around. Like, every scene that Theon is in, someone is being awful to him. And then Bran is, still a bit sort of despondent about the no legs situation. And then I think we can show this shot of Theon with Ros. So one of Theon's few intimate relationships is with a prostitute who he pays. Well, in this case, he doesn't pay her because he's angry and annoyed and serious. Theon is feeling very alone. Ros piles some shit on him. And Ros talks about having sex with Tyrion. So, like, the one person who Theon is intimate with is also selling herself to other men, and so that makes Theon feel even more alone. And we have Varys warning Ned that, hey, you realize that the Lannisters might kill the king. The king is in danger. The king is a fool. You have to protect him. And the sort of ulterior motive here is that Varys is trying to slow down the brewing conflict between the Starks and the Lannisters. Because remember that Varys is working for a Targaryen restoration. Varys is trying to put a Targaryen on the throne. In the books, Varys is trying to put this kid called Young Griff on the throne. In the show, he tries to put Daenerys on the throne. But of course, at this point, Viserys is apparently the preferred candidate, because Varys ordered an assassination, or is about to order an assassination against Daenerys, under the orders of King Robert. So, like, presumably at this point, Varys doesn't think that Daenerys is who he wants on the throne, which means that Viserys is who he wants on the throne, except Viserys is obviously mad, and Varys would have to know that because Viserys is with Illyrio, who is Varys' ally. So, like, I think there's a bit of sort of awkward retconning that has to happen in Season 1 in terms of Varys' motivations, because it makes sense in the books because there's other characters, but in the show it's questionable. But anyway, Arya chases Cats down into the basement, and she sees these dragon skulls. In the books, these dragon skulls are black, like glassy black. Well, not like obsidian, but they're black, which I think it looks cooler than. Or I think it would be harder to film, I suppose, because you couldn't see the shadows if it was black, could you? So it'd be harder to make out the shape of a dragon skull. Maybe that's why they did it, or maybe they just didn't have enough black spray paint. I'm not here to speculate about the production. But anyway, so Arya wanders down into the basement, and then she hears people coming, and she sees Varys and Illyrio scheming. And what they're talking about is basically that they do want war to happen between Starks and Lannisters, but they don't want it to happen yet. They want the war to happen a little later, once they've got the Targaryen ready, so that they can come and invade when the realm is weak. And Tyler in the chat says, question, why would a Targ be better for the realm than a Baratheon, especially if it would start a huge war? I think a large part of the justification is that the Targaryens have ruled Westeros for 300 years, and there's a lot of, like, political legitimacy seen in the Targaryens. And there's people in Westeros, even though, like, the Mad King was crazy, there are still people in Westeros who say, like, yeah, things were better when the Targaryens were in charge. A lot of people see a Targaryen king as, like, the natural state of affairs. And meanwhile, like, passing from a Baratheon to another Baratheon, Joffrey, is, like, a more tricky proposition, seeing as that's never happened before. There's never been a Baratheon inheriting from another Baratheon. And, of course, it's complicated by the fact that Joffrey isn't really a Baratheon, and, like, also Renly wants to be king and all that stuff. So, like, I think there are good reasons for Varys to not support the Baratheon situation. But of course, like, if Varys' goal is peace, then yeah, like, absolutely, it does seem pretty bullshit for him to start a war to get a different king on the throne, especially if in Season 1, Varys' preferred king is Viserys fucking Targaryen, of all people. So, yeah, like, you can definitely question Varys' motives. And I think in the books, there's a lot of really interesting, complex, personal stuff going on with Varys. There's a pretty good video on YouTube about Varys that you might want to watch. But yeah, in the show, Varys' motivations, frankly, don't make as much sense. And I don't expect Varys to play a huge role in Game of Thrones Season 8, because he doesn't in, 7 and 6. Alright, so Arya finds herself trapped down in the basement, and she has to find an alternative point of egress. Is that how you use that word? Egress? Egress? I don't know. Littlefinger is a big fan of the throne, and we get these fun scenes where Varys and Littlefinger are staring each other down, and they sort of pose as rival political machinators. Is that a word? Machinators? Machinations, okay, whatever. But the point is that they are the real players behind. They are the upper level. They are pulling the strings. They are the Tony Teflons of King's Landing, and they are the real people in charge. Except, like, I mean, these aren't scenes that we have in the books. This is something that's invented for the show, just to show us how, like, important and cool Varys and Littlefinger are, and how ambitious and manipulative they are. But one of the sort of interesting things is that in the books, especially, Littlefinger and Varys don't know what each other's plans are. Like, Varys, like, explicitly says that he doesn't know what Littlefinger's trying to achieve. And as far as we know, Littlefinger doesn't know that Varys is trying to make a Targaryen restoration happen. So, like this shot gives you the impression that they are, like, directly butting heads as rivals, but they're actually sort of like moving past each other for most of the story so far. So I don't know, but it is cool. These scenes are fun anyway. So Arya emerges from the below the Red Keep out into these tunnels. Interesting to know that there is a secret way into the Red Keep through some underground passage, and there are no locked doors. There are no locked doors in between this beach and the inside of the Red Keep. That's an interesting fact. There are secret tunnels in the Red Keep. And so then Arya comes back. Oh, yeah, and we have this gorgeous scene where Arya's like talking her way past the gold cloaks, which is mirrored in season 7 when Arya talks her way past some guards to get into Winterfell. But Arya is reprimanded by her father, Ned Stark, who's worried about Arya disappearing again. And then Yoren turns up, and Yoren mistakes Arya for a boy, which happens a bunch of times, which is about trying to wear away Arya's identity. And Yoren also tells Ned that, oh, by the way, did you know that your wife just kidnapped the brother of the queen and is taken him to the house of her crazy sister? Like, Ned is starting to realize that, oh shit, this political situation is not only above my head, it is miles above my head. It is, if I was a giraffe, it would still be above my head. If I was a giraffe standing on the backs of a dozen other giraffes, it is so high above my head that I am a uncomfortable giraffe. And then the Knights of the Vale ride up to meet Catelyn and Tyrion, led by Vardas Egan, I believe. And all right, and then we have this small council scene. Oh, and yet no, the Vale, by the way, the appearance of the Vale changes dramatically between season 1 and season 3 or 4 or whenever it is. It gets redesigned a lot. This does look fairly ludicrous, although in the books it's probably even more ludicrous. Like, there's meant to be this giant piercing mountain called the Giant's Lance and this weeping waterfall thing, and it takes you ages to get up to the Eyrie and mules and stuff, and they don't do any of that in the show, and fair enough, because it would be like expensive and finicky. Anyway, so then we have this scene where we're talking about the small council wants to order the assassination of Daenerys because they've just found out that Daenerys is pregnant and they don't want another Targaryen to threaten Robert's realm. And Ned Stark refuses to kill a child because that's kind of Ned Stark's entire jam. He's been protecting Jon Snow all this time. He's been protecting that Targaryen. Why not protect another Targaryen, Daenerys? And specifically, he's protecting a Targaryen baby, Daenerys' unborn child. So Ned really is repeating his protection of baby Jon Targaryen in this scene. And that causes a sort of a breakup between him and Robert. What's that meme? Like, friendship ended with what's his name? Now X is my best friend. Ned has ended his friendship with King Robert, and he doesn't have a new best friend. Ned is in a very, very tenuous situation. And we come back to the Eyrie, where Catelyn Stark is realizing, hang on, my sister is a bit loopy. She hasn't seen her sister in a while. She's been stuck up in the Eyrie all this time. So it's a disturbing revelation that her sister has become a bit nutty, and she's got a kid who she's breastfeeding well into his well older than he should. Sticky Stickman says they wrote an essay about this scene last semester. What was your argument, Sticky Stickman? Give us the TLDR in the chat. All right, so Tyrion is also realizing that he's in a terrifying situation. He gets accused of the murder of Jon Arryn, which he also didn't do. He's got 2 supposed murders laid at his feet, neither of which he's responsible for. So a very bad day for Tyrion Lannister, and he's thrown out into a sky cell, which is this horrific form of imprisonment where you're on this sloped floor that leads out to this terrifying abyss, and there's the danger of like falling and rolling out there in the night. So it's a terrible psychological punishment. And there's some graffiti on the wall back there, I think, about, you can fly or something. It's meant to drive people mad to be out in this cell. So Tyrion's having a bad day. For anyone who was wondering, yes, Renly and Loras do bone. And a lot of people have complained about Loras and Renly's characterization. Like, both of these guys in the books are like very like powerful, respected people. Whereas in some of these scenes, they portray them as sort of like stereotypically feminine gay people, like sort of in a stereotype, like Renly's afraid of blood, and Loris really likes fringed sleeves and such. These characters are cooler in the books, I would say. Not that it's uncool to be feminine, but you get the point. That it's a difference, and it's part of a stereotype, I think. And then we get this scene with Robert and Cersei. And the point of this scene is that Loras thinks that Renly should be king. And this is where Renly decides that, hey, screw the succession. I'm a cool guy. I should be king because I'm a cool guy. And Loras is a big fan of that idea. Robert has this wonderful scene with Cersei. I think maybe like the best scene that isn't in the books. This is one of the scenes that was written for the show, and I think it's great because it shows the relationship that Cersei and Robert have, and it's about how like they hate each other, but they're also sort of they understand each other because they're both in this similar situation of like being in charge of the country and not liking their relationship and feeling a bit trapped in it. And they're reminiscing about the past when like Cersei's like, oh, I used to actually feel something for you. Like maybe it would have been possible for us to actually have loved each other once. And then Robert says, no, I could never have loved you. And that's sort of the moment where Cersei's like, okay, I'm going to fucking kill you. It's kind of the moment where they lose hope for that relationship. And it's sort of put to rest because Robert still loves Lyanna Stark, this woman who he loved or at least he lusted after, and who died, and who, if Lyanna did live to marry Robert, the relationship probably would have been no better than Cersei's and Robert's, because Robert fell in love with an idea, and he fell in love with the feeling of being in love with her. And he's just that ghost is something that he can't let go of, and so that prevents him and Cersei from ever really getting along. So a lot of wine is drunk, a lot of drama happens, and it's a good time. Then we have Ned visiting another one of the bastards of King Robert, this kid Barra, the child of Megan, and it's just a further revelation of the whole seed is strong thing. And then Ned comes out of the brothel to see Jaime fucking Lannister, who is very angry about the capture of his brother Tyrion. Jaime is very protective of his little brother, and there's a fight. We see how brutal Jaime is. He puts a knife through the eye of Jory, and he threatens Ned, and Jaime has a fun time getting into some sword clanging with Ned, and finally Ned gets stabbed in the leg by a Lannister spear and gets left in the streets to bleed. So this is when shit starts getting really hairy between the Starks and the Lannisters, and this is where their spiff becomes a war. Is spiff the word I'm thinking of? Like a tiff. I think a tiff is what I was thinking of. And so, all right, we're going to do one more episode, guys. We're going to do one more episode. We're up to episode 6. We're going to do that, then we're going to call it, and we'll continue our speed run another day. So Ned Stark wakes up from a dream. In the books, this is where he has his Tower of Joy dream, but we don't get to see that until season 6 of the show. So Ned's unwell. He's got a sore leg. He's got a boo-boo on his leg. And then we have this great interaction where Cersei Lannister is angry at Robert for putting up with the Starks, capturing Tyrion and fighting Jaime. Cersei's trying to speak up for her family, and she's got her classic proud, aggressive vibe going on. And Cersei says, I should wear the armor and you should wear the gown. And then Robert smacks Cersei across the face, and Cersei's like, oh, I'm going to get a black eye, and she says that I shall wear it like a mark of honor. And then Robert says, be quiet or I'll honor you again, which I think is just such a wonderfully written, venomous testament to just how awful the relationship is between the king and the queen, which bodes poorly for the health of the realm itself. So Daenerys is chilling and killing, and she picks up a dragon egg and she puts it in a fire. Why does she choose to put it in a fire? We don't really know, but she does it. And what we learn is that Daenerys can't be burnt in the show. She like heats up this egg, she touches the burning hot egg, and she is not harmed. Her skin is unmarked. So this is just sort of a bit of foreshadowing for what happens later when Daenerys survives a fire in the season finale. And we go into another Bran dream where he sees the three-eyed crow down in the crypts. Something important is going to happen in the crypts, or maybe it's just the revelation of Ned's death, who knows. But then Hodor brings the special saddle that Tyrion designed so that Bran can ride, and Bran, for the first time in a while, feels freedom and happiness, and it's great. And then Theon is talking to Robb about, like, hey, you're going to have to go to war after this whole Lannister-Stark situation. But then Bran wanders off, and then he gets accosted by some wildlings who have come south because they're scared of White Walkers. And then Theon saves the day by killing one of the wildlings, but then Robb is just angry at Theon for having endangered Bran's life by shooting an arrow so close to him. So again, Theon ends up getting shit on by trying to be helpful. And then we go back to the Eyrie, where Tyrion is in the sky cells and he almost slips off into the abyss. And then we have this jailer Maud, who's one of the most like comical and silly characters in all of Game of Thrones. He's just sort of this stupid, angry, violent guy who acts like a cartoon character. It's all a bit weird. He feels quite out of place in Game of Thrones, but I suppose in Season 1 they're still trying to work out what Game of Thrones, the show, is. They're still trying to work out the tone. But basically Tyrion manages to talk his way out of the sky cell by saying that, hey, I'm going to confess my crimes. Which of course turns out to be a ruse, but we'll get to that. And then Arya is being trained by Syrio Forel, and Arya is feeling really down because Ned has just been wounded and all this horrible stuff is happening. But then Syrio says that, well, when you're troubled is the best time to train. Because trouble doesn't come when everything's happy and you're playing with the rainbows and the unicorns. Trouble happens when you're feeling troubled and shit's going down. That's when you need to be ready for a fight. So they train, and Syrio says to Arya that there's only one god, and his name is Death. And that, of course, connects to the whole Faceless Men situation in Season 5, when Arya joins the House of Black and White. So Arya trains, and she's having a good time. And then Daenerys Targaryen has a snack. She's a little bit peckish, so she eats a horse heart, and this is this whole sort of religious ritual where Daenerys is eating it for the sake of the strength of her unborn child, and we also get this prophecy of the stallion that will mount the world, and it's this idea of a Dothraki Khal that will unite all of the Dothraki and take over the world, which is an example of a prophecy that does not come true. There is no stallion that mounts the world, unless you consider that maybe Drogon, the dragon, is Daenerys' stallion, who will help her conquer the world. Maybe that is the meaning of the prophecy. Thank you very much, Alex Dishon, for the donation. And then we have dragon eggs attempted to be stolen by Viserys, because he's just realized that, hang on a minute, I have no power over these Dothraki. Like, the reason why Viserys wanted Daenerys to marry Drogo is so that Viserys could use the Dothraki army. But Viserys realizes that, all this adoration that she's getting, all this loyalty, what Viserys wanted, he'll never get from these people. So Viserys says, fuck it, I'm going to go do my own thing. So he tries to steal Daenerys' dragon eggs, but he gets stopped by Jorah. Here I stand, Jorah says, which happens to be the Mormont words. So Viserys gets stopped from doing that stupid thing. Which only frustrates him more. And then, Tyrion gets beaten some more, but he talks his way out into the Eyrie, where he talks to Lysa, and he says, I'm going to confess my crimes, and it's going to be great. And so instead, he makes a whole bunch of lurid jokes and talks about bringing a jackass and a honeycomb into a brothel, the first half of a joke that we've never heard the punchline to. Maybe we will in the final. Maybe that'll be how the entire series ends. We'll finally find out what happened with the jackass and the honeycomb. Maybe Podrick has something to do with it. We'll find out. But Tyrion basically does this whole sort of comedic, theatrical, wonderful thing where he's like, here are all of my crimes, but oh wait, I've never murdered anyone. I didn't kill Jon Arryn. I didn't try to kill Bran. This is unjust. This is bullshit. And then Lysa's like, I think I'll chuck you out a hole anyway. And Robin Arryn is very keen to make the small man fly. And then Tyrion's like, all right, if I'm not going to get any justice here, I'm going to demand trial by combat. So Tyrion says, who's going to fight for me? I'd like to have Jaime fight for me. Then Lysa's like, well, Jaime is miles away. He can't fight for you. You got to pick someone else. So Tyrion's like, please, someone fight for me. And then his main man, Bronn, steps up to the plate. He's like, why not? Shrug, I'll fight for you. I might get some money out of it. So we set that up. And then meanwhile, Robert goes hunting with his brother Renly and with Barristan Selmy and with Lancel Lannister, the most loyal wine carrier in all the kingdoms, who Cersei has instructed to get Robert really drunk so that he's likely to die on this hunt. And this has got to be one of the most obviously low-budget scenes in the show. They don't even have horses. Surely you have horses when you go on a hunt. But anyway, they're just walking around going on a hunt, and this is the hunt where Robert ends up dying. Gina in the chat asks, why was Bronn there in the Eyrie? The reason why Bronn was there is that he was at the inn at the crossroads, where Catelyn, and you know, Bronn is just like a sellsword, a mercenary. He just goes around looking for some ways to make some money by stabbing things with his sword, and he happened to be at the inn at the crossroads when Tyrion was arrested by Catelyn. And so when Catelyn went east to the Eyrie with Tyrion, she invited a bunch of the people around, a bunch of the mercenaries and a bunch of the Riverland soldiers. She invited a bunch of those people to come with her to help guard against the mountain clansmen who are in the Mountains of the Moon. And so, you know, Bronn was welcome to come along and to join that party. And you know, Bronn developed this relationship with Tyrion and saw this opportunity for gold, and that's why Bronn is at the Eyrie, and that's why Bronn fights for Tyrion. So yeah, Robert, meanwhile, is getting really drunk. He's getting absolutely smanged, and so that ends up being his death. So, you know, of course, you know, Cersei certainly contributed to Robert's death, but Robert still drank all the bloody wine. I think you can see Robert's death in an abstract sort of way as a suicide. He drank himself to death. You know, he was sort of self-destructing in some metaphorical sense because he was unhappy in his role as king, and he wasn't able to be the warrior that he wanted to be. He didn't have the woman he wanted to be. He wasn't living the life he wanted to live. And so I think he's eating and he's drinking and his fatness and all of that failure, I think, is him leading to his own death in a lot of ways. So, you know, Robert's death has many culprits, I think. So then Littlefinger is saying, oh, that's a bad idea, because what's happening is that Ned Stark has just gotten word that Gregor Clegane is raiding and burning and reaving through the Riverlands. And Ned Stark does not take lightly to that sort of banditry. So Ned Stark declares that Tywin Lannister, as the lord who controls the mountain, has to come to the Iron Throne and explain what's going on, or else Tywin will be declared an enemy of the crown and he'll be required to be executed. We're going to start a war. Like, Ned is basically declaring war in this moment, is what he's doing, which is probably a bad idea when, like, you don't have all the facts and not everything's under control. I mean, Ned in this point is pretty confident because he believes that Tyrion is a prisoner of Catelyn, but Ned doesn't know that Tyrion's just been freed. So the Starks are at a strategic disadvantage, and this whole declaration is a pretty bad idea. And meanwhile, we have Ned sending Beric Dondarrion off to deal with the mountain. Beric was recast. This is just a minor role, but this is the man who eventually becomes the Lightning Lord of the Brotherhood Without Banners under the Hollow Hill. This is his beginning. This is his origin story. This is his Batman Begins. Bronn fights for Tyrion, and he wins the trial of combat, and Bronn wins it by fighting dirty. In the books, he, like, pushes a statue on top of Vardis Egan and all this stuff. But the point is that Bronn fights dirty and wins, and saves Tyrion, and a good time is had by all. And Tyrion pays his debts. He throws some gold to Mord, because he promised him gold if he let him speak to Lysa. So Tyrion walks free. And then we have this scene with Sansa hanging out with Septa Mordain. And Sansa is really, really rude to Mordain. Like, really, like, catty teenage stuff. Like, she's saying, like, oh, you know, where are you from? Oh, wait, I don't care. Like, Sansa's really cartoonishly mean to Mordain, because I suppose that's how teenagers behave when they are in an uncomfortable situation and they're uncertain and they're anxious and they're hormonal. They respond by being mean sometimes. Teenagers, who would have thought? But then the love interest comes along, the handsome Prince Charming Joffrey, and for once he's actually being nice to Sansa, basically because Cersei told him he had to. And he gives her a necklace, and they kiss for the first time, and Sansa for a moment is like, my dreams are becoming true. What I want is actually happening, right before everything turns to shit. So then Roz goes south to King's Landing. She hears that war is brewing, and so she decides to capitalize on that by going south. She reckons she'll get better business as a prostitute down there. And Theon is really sad because Theon was close to Roz, and Roz, even though Roz holds Theon in some contempt, Roz is one of the only intimate relationships that Theon has. And so Theon is left feeling even more alone after Roz leaves. And Roz, meanwhile, embarks on a whole, complicated arc of political machinations that she gets involved with, none of which happens in the books. Roz is invented for the show, so she's one of the more interesting show-only characters. And then Ned tells Arya and Sansa that they're going back to Winterfell because, shit's getting real, war is looking really likely, so Ned's first priority is to make his children safe. And Sansa's like, I can't leave because I need to have babies with the Lannisters. And so Arya says, 7 hells. That's a great gif. And Arya also doesn't want to leave because Arya wants to continue her training with Syrio Forel. And in the books, they agree for Syrio to come north to Winterfell. But of course, that doesn't end up happening. And this is finally the moment where it finally twigs in Ned Stark's brain where he's like, I've realized that the seed is strong, Baratheon children have black hair, but the Lannister children are all blonde. So Joffrey, Myrcella, and Tommen are all blonde, and that means that they're actually not the child of Robert. They're actually the child of Jaime and Cersei Lannister. Incest babbies, which means that Joffrey is not the legitimate prince, which means that Ned has to tell his best friend Robert that his whole family is a lie. Except that Robert is actually going to die, which makes Stannis the rightful king, except Renly thinks he's the king, which, TLDR, that's how the War for the Five Kings starts. Meanwhile, Daenerys is having a fun time at a little Dothraki soiree. They're celebrating after the whole mountain the world thing. The stallion that mounts the world. And then Viserys does something really fucking stupid. He gets drunk and he walks into the party with a sword and points the sword at the belly of the pregnant lady right in front of her very powerful, angry husband. And this is really where Viserys signs his own death warrant. And this is also the moment where Daenerys is like, okay, Viserys is no brother of mine. This man is too far gone. He's no brother to me. And Viserys has this sort of tragic moment where he's like, all I wanted was what was promised. All I wanted was a golden crown. I just wanted power. I just wanted status. I just wanted what was promised to me all my life as a prince. This kid grew up as a prince of the most powerful dynasty in Westeros, and he thought that he'd have the world. He's a bit like Joffrey, he was promised everything, and he was too coddled into actually realizing that other people have feelings. There is sort of a tragedy to Viserys. And he says, all I wanted was a golden crown. And so Drogo says, crown for king. And he pours molten gold upon Viserys' head. Gold that got molten far, far quicker than it should have. Go look up super temperatures. But the point is that Viserys dies. His head goes to the ground with a clunk. And then Daenerys says, Viserys was no dragon. Fire cannot kill a dragon. So she acts in this really sort of creepy, numb way to the death of her brother, because at this point she's just sort of disowned him in his head. And of course the whole fire cannot kill a dragon is further foreshadowing of Daenerys' fireproofedness, which is not a thing in the books, but it is a thing in the show. She's apparently always immune to fire. Okay, guys, are we going to do more episodes? Are we going to keep rolling with this speed run? I'm going to take a hot moment to hydrate, and then we'll get back to it, I think, maybe. We'll do a little bit more, because we've got to get this speed run done, guys. All right. All right. See, episode 7. All right, we'll do one more episode. We'll do one more episode. It'll be fun. All right, so we go to the Lannister camp. This is the camp of the Lannister army, Tywin Lannister's army, who is preparing to fight the Starks because there's no way in hell Tywin is going to submit meekly to Ned Stark. He's not going to follow the order to come to King's Landing. He's going to fucking fight to get back Tyrion, because even though Tywin doesn't like Tyrion, he is his son, and Lannister honor and is on the line. So Tywin fights for it. And we have this conversation, again invented for the show, where where Jaime is talking to his father, Tywin, and Charles Dance, the actor. He actually skinned a real deer for real for this scene, and he did it multiple times because they were, reshooting the scene a bunch of times, lots of takes. So Charles Dance is a force to be reckoned with on and off screen, I would say. And Jaime is all like, oh, I don't care what anyone thinks of me. And then Tywin says, well, you want people to think that you don't care what people think. So we get this sort of, complexity to Jaime's sort of, Jaime's arrogance and his pride, which is all sort of a defense mechanism for his insecurities. And Jaime's, trying to be all sort of aggressive and proud, but Tywin's having none of his bullshit. And Tywin's basically like, you need to man up. You need to be what you were always meant to be. Because Jaime's always been, this sort of hot-headed warrior who is irresponsible and he doesn't care about thinking anything through. Tywin's saying, it's time to really just get your shit together and be a man and take your shit in order. And Jaime's a bit upset about it all. Jaime and Tywin's relationship is not a whole lot better than the other Lannister children's relationships. And then we have this scene where Cersei and Ned confront each other. And Cersei acknowledges to Ned that, yeah, I am in an incestuous relationship with Jaime. And it's real, and I care about my children. I care about my incest spawn just as much as you care about your kids, and I'm doing what I'm doing to protect my kids, because if you tell the truth about the incest, then my children will be in danger, so, I'm gonna fucking strike you down if I have to. And I think one of my favorite lines in the series is, Ned talks about, Robert's going to be really angry when he comes back from this hunt and finds out about the incest. And Cersei says, what of my wrath? What of my wrath, Lord Stark? Because Cersei talks about how, when she was married to Robert, she had to suffer through all that bullshit and, all these years of being in this loveless relationship and not having her voice and not having her personal power and constantly having other people in control of her life. She complains that when does she get to express her desires like everyone else gets to? When does she get to inflict her will upon the universe? And it's kind of that wrath and that impulse that leads to Cersei's tyranny later in the show when she makes herself queen. And so Cersei then delivers the classic line in the Game of Thrones, you win or you die. So shit's getting real, and things are not looking good for Ned. And of course, this conversation, should never have happened if Ned was being purely strategic about this. Because what Ned's doing here is he's warning Cersei that, hey, shit's about to go down, you better run off and protect your kids, because I don't want you to get hurt. I especially don't want your kids to get hurt. So please, leave, and there'll be no need for violence. But Cersei chooses violence. Cersei doesn't want to fucking futz about. She's not going to retreat. She would rather fight, which does reveal one of the sort of underlying things about Cersei is that, one of her defining characteristics is that she does love her children. She'll protect her children at any cost. But, Cersei would be better off, Cersei's children might be better off if she did step back at this moment. If Cersei was less aggressive, her children would probably be more safe. Tommen ends up dying as a result of Cersei's unnecessary conflict with the Sparrows, and Joffrey dies as a result of the Lannisters' unnecessary conflict with Tyrion, and Myrcella dies as a result of the unnecessary conflict with Dawn. Not all of that was Cersei's fault, but, Cersei's aggression and pride and need for power threatens the lives of her children at many points in the story. So you can really question whether Cersei is entirely driven by this motherly protective nature, or whether she's more driven by this proud, angry, vengeful Lannister thing. Thanks for the super chat, Alex. All right, so we get a scene with Littlefinger in his brothel. Let's show that shot. Looks pretty safe. So Ros and Amerka These two prostitutes are being trained by Littlefinger, and Littlefinger gives this monologue about how, I learned at a young age that, people will fuck with you, and you got to fuck them back, is basically what he says. You're not going to win by being a hero. You're not going to win by playing by the rules. You're going to win by screwing people over, figuratively or literally. And so that's sort of Littlefinger's cruel philosophy by which he seeks to dominate the world. And then Theon is really unpleasant to Osha. So Osha, tomato. Yeah. Yeah, Darth in the chat points out that one of the charming lines in this scene is, "Play with her ass," Littlefinger says, while he's monologuing about his life story. This is the most egregious example of sexposition in the early season, which they do a lot less of in the later seasons. Anyway, so Theon is really unpleasant to the captive Osha. He's trying to hit on her and lord over her, and show how superior he is. And this is right after Theon has lost Ros. So, just when he's feeling really insecure, when he's lost this intimate person in his life, he's being more sort of arrogant and unpleasant to the people around him, because that's how he copes with his feelings. And Osha has dealt with worse than Theon Greyjoy. We also have Maester Luwin comes in and chats with Osha afterwards, and Osha talks about the threat of the White Walkers, and, Luwin as a Maester doesn't believe in White Walkers, and that whole sort of ideological, is the supernatural real thing, happens. And then we have Jon and Sam up on the wall, and they see some rangers coming in, because what happened, I think, is that Benjen's horse returns without Benjen. So Jon is worried about the life of his beloved uncle, and Jeor Mormont is stoic as ever. And then Robert dies. Robert comes back from his hunt with less intestines than he started out with, because he got drunk and the Borg gored him. So Cersei's like, I better look concerned, because Cersei's wanted Robert dead for a long time. But, maybe in some sense she's also a bit disturbed to see her husband dying. The man who she once had feelings for dying in front of her. And Joffrey is also concerned. Remember that Joffrey believes that Robert is his father. Joffrey died believing that Robert was his father. So this sort of loss in Joffrey's life is not a good thing for his well-being. Barristan and Renly are all bloodied and concerned. They were on the hunt when this happened. Barristan feels guilty because he failed in his duty as a Kingsguard. He failed to guard the king. The blood is on his Kingsguard sigil. The symbolism is evident. Like bloody, who's the Shakespearean fellow? Like Lady Macbeth, the blood is on his hands and he can't wash it off. And that's why Barristan goes over to Essos and tries to redeem himself by protecting Daenerys instead. So then we have a chat with Robert and Ned was going to tell Robert that Joffrey, Myrcella, and Tommen aren't his children, but Ned doesn't have the heart to tell the king that his friend's legacy is a lie on his deathbed. So when Robert writes his will, he makes Ned the Lord Protector, like the regent, until Joffrey comes of age, and Ned changes the wording, so it just says until my heir comes of age, because the true heir is Stannis Baratheon, not Joffrey. And that's one of those moments of Ned using a little bit of deception in the protection of children. Ned, for all of his honesty and honor, Ned does do a few tricksy plays here and there. And then we also have a moment afterwards where I think Varys implicates that Lancel Lannister, who gave Robert the wine, might be partially responsible for the death of Robert. Then we have this scene where Daenerys is trying to convince Drogo that we should go invade Westeros. She's like, hey, wouldn't it be fun? It would be a great time. And Drogo has only a vague conception of what Westeros really is. He doesn't realize that it's this whole, continent. Like, the world to the Dothraki is mostly confined to the Dothraki Sea and the immediate surrounds. So Drogo's like, maybe we'll pop down the road to Westeros one day, but I'm not that interested. A Dothraki Carl does not need a seat. He only needs a horse and a Khaleesi. And Daenerys is not super keen on that that issue. She's got to find a way to convince Drogo to invade Westeros. Drogo, Lucas says. Yes. Daenerys wants Drogo to go. And so then Jorah gets a letter. And this letter is, I think, from... Yeah, what exactly is the sequence of events? No, yeah, so Jorah gets... So in the market at Vaes Dothrak, Jorah gets a letter from Varys and the Small Council saying that Jorah has been given a pardon, which means that Jorah can finally go home. But he's realizing that, that probably means that Daenerys is in danger, now that they know that Daenerys is pregnant. And so when this wine seller comes along and says, hey, Daenerys, I'm going to give you some delicious wine free of charge, Jorah is suspicious and saves Daenerys from the poison. So this is probably the moment where Jorah's like, okay, I'm actually more loyal to Daenerys. I'm not going to go home. I'm not going to take the pardon. I'm going to stay and protect Daenerys instead. And then we have this ceremony with the Night's Watch, where the recruits are becoming proper official members of the Night's Watch. We have this speech about what the Night's Watch is all about. That fellow Clydas is meant to have a big boil on his face in the books. That's really not important at all. And then Jon Snow is hanging out. And what happens is that the Night's Watch recruits are told what role they're going to play in the Night's Watch. Everyone is assigned as either a ranger or a builder or a steward. And Jon Snow has always wanted to be a ranger, like his uncle Benjen, because they're the guys who get to go out and fight things and kill wildlings and have adventures. But Jon Snow is instead made a steward. And he's really upset about that until Sam explains that they're grooming you for command, and that Jill Mormont is taking Jon as like his personal servant guy so that Jon can learn how to lead and eventually become a commander himself. That's what's happening. And so, Pip is complaining about the real reason he was sent to the Watch, because some lord tried to diddle him, is apparently what happened, or whatever. And then Sam is like, I always wanted to be a wizard. There's a whole lot of weird shit that happens. But the point is that Jon is a steward to the Lord Commander, and he's being set up to lead himself. So Renly comes up to Ned, and he's like, yo, Ned, if you want to be smart about this, we got to buy some fucking soldiers, we got to get some forces in line, and we've got to take the throne. We've got to capture Joffrey, we've got to hold him prisoner, because whoever holds the king is going to hold the political future of Westeros. Like, now is the time to act. Renly's being pragmatic, and Ned's just like, no, I'm going to do it by the book. I'm Honorable Ned Stark. I'm just gonna walk into the throne room and say that Stannis should be king, and everything's gonna go fine. But he's wrong, and Renly is right. And then Littlefinger comes in and slides into Ned's DMs and says, hey, alright, maybe you don't want to be too dishonorable about it, but let me do this for you. Let me get the gold cloaks on your side. Like, you got to go take the throne, you got to go assume your place as regent, you got to go sort out the succession. Let me help you. I'm Littlefinger. I'm the most trustworthy person in the world. I'll buy the gold cloaks for you. And so Ned is like, sure, make sure they're on side. Great. And then Jon and Sam go out to swear their Night's Watch vows. They're officially becoming a part of this brotherhood, and they swear in front of a weirwood tree. And it's kind of funny how Sam, like Jon is one of the only people who swears in front of the weirwood tree because he's one of the only people who worships the old gods. Almost everyone else worships the Faith of the Seven. Sam's family worships the Faith of the Seven, but he decides to come up to the old gods instead because, hey, the Faith of the Seven never did much for him, so why not go and join the old gods? Which I think is probably anachronistically sort of postmodern sort of a thing to do, to sort of like choose a different religion. My understanding is that that's a pretty modern idea, the idea of just like picking out a religion like a new hat. Like an accessory. It tended to be like pretty ingrained in your culture. But what do I know? But Westeros can do it at once, and we get to see Ghost. We get to see a doggo. We don't see many of them. This weirwood face looks pretty goofy. And they say their vows, and then immediately after, some serious spookers start happening. When Ghost comes up with the hand of none other than Jaffa Flowers, or Othor, one of the two. The hand of a dead man, a dead human, is dropped by Ghost at Jon's feet, and that's when they realize shit's going down. So those are the dead watchmen who were with Benjen. and who end up turning into whites later on. So Jon is like, uh-oh, shit's real. And then Daenerys is hanging out with Drogo, and Drogo has just found out that some wine cellar tried to poison his waifu. So he's very angry about that, and he declares that I am going to conquer Westeros. I'm going to take down the stone houses, and I'm going to burn the fields and rape the women, he says. And Daenerys is like, oh yeah, no, that sounds great. And, it's only later that Daenerys starts to see the realities of what war and pillaging and raping really is, and starts to get a more complex conception of what all that's about. But at the moment, she's excited and happy that Drogo is agreeing to take her home and to take back her throne. And then the fateful moment when Ned and his boys walk into the Great Hall, and Ned tries to take over as regent, as is his right, as the king decreed it. But it turns out that Ned's allies are not quite so reliable as he had hoped. Cersei don't give a shit about no piece of paper. She tears up the king's thing that says that Ned should be the regent, much to Barristan's concern. And Joffrey says that I'm the king, and you got to say that I'm the king. And then it starts turning into violence, and the Hound pulls his sword out. I think that's the last time we see the Hound helmet, which is a shame. It's a cool helmet. And then Ned thinks he's going to be able to take over the throne room because of the gold cloaks, but surprise, surprise, he got Littlefingered. Littlefinger lied and deceived Ned, and he tells Ned, I did warn you not to trust me, which, to be fair, he did. All right, thank you for listening, ladies and gentlemen, to this installment of the Old Schwift X speedrun recap of Game of Thrones. We got a lot further through the series than we did last time. Last time we only did 1.5 episodes. This time we did 5.5 episodes. So we've made some progress. If the acceleration continues at this rate, I'm sure we'll finish the series in just a few more installments. I don't know how far we're going to get, but we'll probably do another couple more of these. So thank you for participating. Thank you for the donations. Thanks for all of that. We'll do more later. We'll probably do an Alt Schwift X, a cock-abridged episode again. For those who don't know, that's a show where we discuss a chapter of each Game of Thrones book, chapter by chapter. It does tend to get a little bit tangential. If you're looking for super on-topic discussion, you're probably not going to find it here. But if you are interested in going off-topic a bit, go check out that podcast. You can listen to it as an audio podcast, and there's a link in the description for that podcast. So, cheers, have a good one. As Hairless Oyster says, stay hydrated, and very soon we'll be into the final season of Game of Thrones. Thanks for listening.